Okay, guys, welcome to the Good Podcast. I am your host, Rob Watson. It's been a little while since I've been speaking to you guys, so I'm really excited. I'm especially excited for the guest I've got today. His name is Neil Meekin. Neil is an innovation and constellations practitioner from Liverpool who loves to facilitate and deliver transformational and dynamic experiences for the people and the community he serves. And for over 20 years, he's been exploring what it means to be a human, our place in society, and the culture we live in as well, and how to become a better person, which sums up pretty well what I want to do with this podcast about us becoming better versions of ourselves. So, Neil, firstly, thank you for speaking with me today.
Oh, thank you, Rob. It's amazing to be here. Yeah, I've got to know you over the last few months, and yeah, been really looking forward to having a conversation with you and going quite deep on a number
No,
of different topics. So thank you for having me.
no, absolute pleasure to have you. And as Neil touched on there, yeah, we've got to know each other a bit over the past few months. I've had the pleasure of doing some sessions with him and going to one of his workshops, and we're going to dive into a lot of that today. But first, Neil, I'd just love to get a bit of a sense of kind of your own background, how you got to where you are today. How did this path take you? Talking about your hero's journey as such.
Yeah, great question. It's something I've been reflecting on recently, actually. I think I feel it's good from time to time just to bring an awareness to like your sort of your breadcrumbs that led you to where you are right now and being able to sort of orientate yourself to what's unfolding for you and has done over the years. So I'd probably say for me, I was a child, Rob. Like I was very very sensitive. Very attuned to people. Almost like my auntie used to call me an old soul. And so from a very early age, there was an indication for me as I reflected that there was something there. But I'll probably say the big turning point for me was when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I was DJing and I was a big clubber, and with that came the consumption of a lot of substances, and it really opened me up. And I got to probably around 23 and had a bit of a burnout and had to just come away from the whole sort of clubbing scene and DJing scene for a little while. But those experiences really opened me up. And when I actually stopped, it created a vacuum. And it was a vacuum of like searching for like, okay, what there's more to life than this? What's going on? Like what's here? Like, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Why am I interested in these things like shamanism and Buddhism and mysticism? And I always had an interest in the occult. Like when I was young, and I remember my mom and my aunties were going to tarot readings, and at like 9, 10 years old, I was absolutely fascinated. But it was unusual for a kid at that time. So subsequently, I've gone on to become almost like a professional tarot reader as a bit of a side hustle later on in life. But there was all these indications that were there, and I wanted to understand more deeply what was going on in the world. And so my 20s was a process of deep exploration, Rob, of many different things. But then over the course of those years, I got involved in Rosicrucianism, which is a form of the mystical order. And there's a whole load of teachings. And what a lot of people don't know is about the Rosicrucians is that there's a temple in Mossley Hill. And it's like those things that like when you're ready, they appear. And so there's this Egyptian style, I would say, temple, big temple in Mossley Hill. And yeah, there was some interesting learnings that I'd go on there. You'll be learning about the Kabbalah, um, developing your psychic faculties, understanding about metaphysical concepts. And this was round the corner. I was living in Tifton Park at the time. So yeah, it was remarkable. And got involved and was exposed to a good friend of mine who's quite a famous DJ called Greg Wilson. I met him when I was 25 and he was a big influence on me at that time. And he introduced me to a spiritual teacher, Rob, called G.I. Gurdjieff, who died in the late 40s, but he had his old system called the Fourth Way. So I was getting exposed to a lot of different things. But another key turning point was when I was 27. So throughout my 20s, I was in a relationship with a lady, got quite serious. And then when we were 26, we bought a house together. Didn't go so well for a number of different reasons. And we split when we were 27. And it was a pretty difficult time. But what it triggered for me and what it was a catalyst for, Rob, was me questioning why I was behaving in a particular way. like where these traits were coming from. Like, why was I like this? Why was I, say, for example, shutting down when the emotions got a little bit too intense? And so it left me with a lot of questions. But again, me being very, very curious, and I can link that to the work that I do now around innovation and entrepreneurship. It was always there. Got me asking loads of questions. And I was lucky in that on my mum's side, I've never met my father, but like on my mum's side, my nan was still alive. Granddad had passed. And so I was able to ask a lot and lots of questions around the family and the family tree and like what my granddad's history was, like going back to Ireland, like her history going back to Ireland and her mum, like growing up during the Second World War and the effects of that. And it was quite a profound experience for me to really understand and start to see a sense of these patterns that were intergenerational. I was like, well, so this doesn't start with me. This is going back. You can see and trace back, like my great grandmother. And we'll talk a bit more deeply about that a little bit later. But that was another catalyst then. So you've got all these mystical occult teachings. Meditation was being a big part. Buddhism was playing a part. So I was really getting a good holistic understanding of spiritual principles, spiritual practices, metaphysical practices, and really bringing them into my life. But at the same time, I was a professional, and then I was a commercial banker, and then I was DJing at the weekends. So there was this really interesting, how can I say, life structure that was manifested in my life, and yeah, that led until my early 30s, and I stopped DJing. It was too much. I was DJing 4 nights a week in the city here in Manchester and London, but also working full time. So I did that for 2 years, Rob, and then I had another burnout. So there's a little pattern here. And I ended up in a cottage in North Wales near Mulvama, more affectionately known as Scouse Mountain. So a rite of passage for a lot of people in Liverpool. And I had a cottage there. And again, I was able to go really deep. And it was at that point I made the decision that I'm going to do 3 more years banking. And then that's it. Like I'm cutting loose. And I'm just going to go traveling and I'm just going to see what happens. And I did that. And again, that was again a profound experience. Because by this point, Rob, I'm not sure about you, and I'd be curious to get your perspective on it at some point during the call. Is that at that time I started to, I don't want to say wake up because it sounds a bit of a cliche, but like all the work I've been doing on myself since me early 20s, all the way through until that point, I was starting to realize that the society and the systems and the social structures that we were operating in were quite oppressive, and they didn't lend themselves well for you to be able to fully express yourself in a general sense. And it was tying you almost, it's almost like a form of slavery, really. And that's just my words. But you can start to get into the matrix, and I don't want to sort of get too much into that. Like, but just the general rule is that you go to work Monday to Friday, you work for the man, you're tied to that, you get 4 weeks off a year. It just never made sense to me. So again, when I went traveling when I was 33, that just blew it all out the water. When I could see how working for a bank of all places was not lending itself well to the health of my soul, so to speak. And so then I moved to New Zealand, ended up living in New Zealand for a long time, Rob. And I was there for 7 years, getting exposed to Maori. So Maori worldview, Maori philosophy, Maori cosmology. So the indigenous people of the land there. And again, more influence. But then just before I came back to the UK. So what happened was during COVID, my nan got terminally ill, and I had to come back. And then when I came back, I started to realize that I needed to come back to the UK. And as I was sort of starting to think about that, family constellations came into my life, which is obviously what you've experienced and what you've experienced a few sessions of, but that was first coming into my awareness then. So I had this experience with my grandmother when I was 27, the split. And then we're now 2019, 2020, coming back to the UK, that family constellations come on my radar. And then that sent me on another journey altogether. So when I came back to the UK, I started to do constellations, and then I trained in Ireland. I've spent probably over the last 3 years, probably 6 to 9 months of that time in Ireland, training in family constellations, but visiting, spending time there, um, connecting to the lands of my ancestors. Yeah, it's been profound, which leads me to where I am now. So there's so many different things. I just wanted to give you a bit of a potted, almost like history of where I am. So there's a lot of spirituality, occult, mysticism, travel, exposure to different cultures, an awareness to different systems, and then an awareness of like how my family ancestry shaped who I am, which in turn shaped me into all the experiences that I've had. So I'll leave it there, and let's start use that as a foundational point to build on.
That's, you know what, that's really amazing to hear that because as you're saying stuff, because we're similar ages and like, like you're just getting parallels and you're thinking, oh, right, yes, something similar, happened to me around the time and certain times when you're opening up and stuff. And it's really interesting to hear, really, really interesting to hear the journey that you've gone on and all the things that you've explored. And often, I think in life, don't we, when we're in certain things, like so many amazing things open up, but often we have really challenging times in our lives as well. And when we're young and those things are happening to us, we don't necessarily, we don't really want them experiences and we want to push them away and we'll look to distract ourselves with this and that and whatnot. Um, but eventually we realize that's all part of our growth. Like, and if we can approach things in life to realize that when things come at us and whatever's happening, it's like actually it's not that life's happening to me, it's happening through me and for me and stuff. And then we grow from that, and then we can eventually, as you are now, you can put together those 20 years worth of life experiences, challenging, open yourself up, traveling, mysticism, delving into the inner workings of the world. That's something that I definitely tapped into around about, I think it was about 2011. My kind of bit of hero's journey was I got to that point when I was like, just got married. We bought the house. I had the sports car. We go on nice holidays. I had my own business. I was getting recognition from my peers, my family, that I was someone who had made it. I was a success. Yet on the inside, I felt like void. And I'm like, I was just chasing. And I think you said that element of society. We're conditioned to, work for the man or whatever, yet, um, and we follow that idea of success. And what does success look like? But it's just that it is very much an illusion, particularly in this world, especially once we start to tap in, like mysticism, other elements to it, and see the magic that is available to us every day and unfolding beyond us. That us chasing after something, this exterior thing, yeah, made me really start to question stuff. And one thing you touched on was like understanding how the world works. And I kind of went down so many rabbit holes exploring all sorts of stuff. You got to be careful. If you read too many David Icke books, you can, you can, but I think maybe you need maybe 10% of that, but 90% light. But I'd really lovely hearing your journey and your travels and everything that you've gone on, to bring you to this kind of point with family constellations. And what I really want to hear is like, so you said you went to, was it Ireland that you were out there? Was it you did your training there and you're open to it? I'd love to, for anyone who's not heard of like family constellations before, to get like a sense of, well, what is it? And what is the potential for it and the power that it has on the individual and those around them?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's a great question. I just want to put a little caveat on there. Total the 20 years. Like you can even go back to like obviously what's important with the family constellations aspects when we start to bring a bit of a frame around this now is bringing an awareness to those first 7 or 8 years and the experiences there and how they shape us because arguably those formative years are what crystallizes into these repeating patterns that continue on when we're like, 45 and 46 respectively, the starts there. That's almost like the soil, that environment, that the seed of Rob or the seed of Neil gets planted into in those formative years that really contribute that environment to developing who we become. So I'll touch on that in a bit. Yeah, so family constellations is it's a powerful method. It's a therapeutic method. It's not a therapy, it's a therapeutic method to bring into light unconscious patterns, behaviors, and traits that have its roots within your family system that is intergenerational. So that's the key part. And often these traits, behaviors, or characteristics didn't start with us. So by working either one-to-one or within a group setting, we're able to reveal these patterns through using other people or these plastic figures, Playmobil figures, as representatives for your family system. So it was developed by a German psychotherapist called Bert Hellinger. I want to say developed. He had a number of different experiences over many years, different therapeutic processes. He's a Catholic missionary. He worked a lot with the Zulu in South Africa, which informed him a lot about sort of understanding and respecting ancestors and ancestral energies. But did a lot of things like primal screen therapy, which is Dr. Arthur Yanov, which the famous band is named after. Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist, very famous, drew on those sort of principles and those methods. But what he was tapping into, and so we've got all these different tools, Rob, but like what he's tapping into, which is important, is, and it's important to understand, it's called the field, the knowing field, just like a quantum field, also known as the morphogenetic field. So Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who is an evolutionary biologist, and he's got a number of different books which I can send you links to, which you can share with the people who listen to the podcast. The morphogenetic field is this field beyond the five senses that we can tune into, that is almost like revealing to us information, so that when we do a family constellation workshop, each individual, we go through different exercises, like we warm different people up in a workshop to start to be able to receive this information through the morphogenetic field. So a good example of a morphogenetic field is when you see a murmuration of starlings, which is where the birds all are tapping into this field of almost like behavior that they can all tap into, that keeps them in almost like harmony and unison. What can happen is, Rob, within a family system, is that can sort of manifest into disharmony, depending on certain things happening within a family system. So with family constellations, the method of bringing harmony back into the family system through these things called movements or healing sentences, which you'll have experienced yourself when you came. So it's very profound. And for me, the more I do family constellations, the more I believe it's a spiritual practice where we're working with what's called phenomenology. So phenomenology, it's an academic term, but it's working with and being present to what's arising in each and every moment. So when you look at Buddhism, for example, when we meditate, we bring presence. We are working with what is unfolding in that moment. That's all that exists. I know we can obviously, when we think we've been in the past, or we can think we're in the future, we can imagine the future. But all that matters is what's in the moment. So when we do family constellations, when we're doing it in a workshop setting, we create a container for that work. We're working what's unfolding phenomenologically. But I'm starting to realize now that like that's the way that we can live each and every moment and each and every day. And I practice that, and I've seen profound change within my life by doing that and living in that way, like what we cultivate within a family constellations workshop. So my own understanding is evolving. And so just one last point, and then I'll stop. Is that Bert Hellinger, who developed family constellations, his philosophy was not just to write anything down, because this field that we tap into is continuously evolving, and it's up to us as individuals, as practitioners, to develop this work out, how we feel into it. Because you said something before, which is life moves through us. There's no Rob out there, or there's no Neil out there, or there's no like Ruth, your wife out there. So and life's moving through us, and that's so. On that point, I'm keen to hear like your perspective on that, maybe your experience of constellations, and just some of the things I've touched on, Rob. But it's a very different way of seeing the world, because we're in a very Darwinian, Aristotelian viewpoint, like very duality, dual, light and dark, bad and good, and it shapes how we see. But this is a very different paradigm. So over to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my experience of it has been like absolutely profound. And like we did a session one-to-one online, and then I came along and did the full day workshop, and I was apprehensive to it because the element of like it can be that profound. You wonder what it's going to unravel, and it depends as well from the own personal experience. I was coming to it with something which was really significant in my life. So it depends what people are bringing to it, because you know that you're gonna basically it feels like you're facing your shadows. As you talked about before. What is it that our limiting beliefs. Often we end up projecting a lot of our stuff onto the individual. It's the outside world that is wrong, and it's not me. And it's fundamentally my own spiritual journey the past like 15 years. It's been taking radical responsibility for everything in my life.
I love that.
And that's an element of family constellations. Even though you can look back and go, look at the generational trauma that follows behind me, I can still take ownership for the stuff that I've done. I can still just choose to respond in a different way. I may have had my negative patterns, but now you can own your stuff. And I think that's one fundamental thing for constellations that helped me. It also helped me have a deep gratitude for my family line. I often think we don't respect even our as in society, we don't even respect our elders who are alive now. Never mind respect the ones that come before us. Yet we wouldn't even be here without them. And I remember coming out of that workshop thinking, having deep gratitude for literally, you know, like think about how many hundreds, if not thousands of people are behind us. And if those people hundreds and hundreds of years ago decided not to, it didn't happen, then I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. Um, and it's really truly fascinating. But I guess what I'd like to come before maybe I go back into maybe some of my stuff, I suppose I'd want to ask maybe you what kind of benefits like or people what are some of the reasons that people would want to attend a family constellation workshop or do any constellation work?
Yeah, great question. So you touched on it there. So how we see our world shapes our world, and how we see our world is shaped by our family system that we grew up in, which in turn was it goes back multi-generational, and the environment that our ancestors grew up in. Like I talked about the war, if you're from Liverpool, like Bob got bombed heavily during World War II. It's almost like you're born into trauma, and then there's obviously a ripple effect from that. But what happens is, from a psychological perspective, we have many blind spots. And so when I say how we see the world shapes the world, what can happen is like we can have difficult relationships with either our mum or dad, grandparents, siblings. A common one that people show up with, Rob, is the difficulty and the challenge of being in relationship with, say, if you're a woman, um, you find you're in these repeated relationships with men who exhibit particular traits, who can sort of, I don't know, cause difficulties for you, might be abusive in some way, but you go into the same place, the relationships continuously. So there's one example. You have difficulty around money, depression, other illnesses that are showing up, having difficulties in work. So all these different issues having a detrimental effect on you living a full and happy life. Obviously, happy subjective, but like living, I suppose, a content, happy life, and that's harmonious. And that can show up in a number of different ways. The reason why I approach family constellations is because I was getting into relationships, and particular relationships with women, but also I had this repeated pattern of burning out, Rob. So I must have burnt out really badly. And when I say burning out, is through um, through workaholic tendencies. So which in turn is addictions. So I had a number of different addictions. And we find that like addiction, if you listen to Gabor Mate, is like around, it's a covering over of something deeper, a pain. And so then through family constellations, for example, I was able to then look at the relationship with my father, who I've never met, and how that was playing out. And I could see clearly the correlation to that. And so these are some of the things that you can look at, but it's around, yeah, relationships, money, illness. So all the classics. But what it does is, like what you said, it brings an awareness to these blind spots and these unconscious patterns so that when you can become aware of them, there's an energetic shift, but then you can then take responsibility for them or not. But people who come to family constellations are ready to take responsibility and create change. So when just doing coming to one workshop or one session, like your life's changing quite dramatically. Not always for the better because there's a process to go through, but they're the type of things that people come for. So mainly for me, it's the relationships and illness.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that. It's basically all the stuff we've got. It's all our baggage, isn't it? It's all the things that we are. And one thing that kind of like it blew me mind, absolutely blew my mind doing the workshop because, like you say, often we're so focused on the five senses and not tapped into sometimes until you start to open up to sort of the mystical, the spiritual element of tapping into other energies. Um, like I felt like as if, it's so potent. And it was almost like 5 years of therapy in like one afternoon. You you go into your depths that much. You purge that much. You shine a light on things. You bring things to light, basically. You bring things like your patterns, and you realize that even though you can own your stuff, it was passed on to you. It's passed on down those lines. And now it's like the time of breaking those chains, isn't it? Because big thing for me is like I've got two daughters. And one of the things I remember we had kids late in our life, and well, later for me, 40. And I always remember even in my 30s, I always been conscious, like, I don't know, I'm not ready to have kids because I don't want to pass all my shit on to them. Like I'd always be like that. Like I don't think I'm ready. So so I had to do a lot of work on myself. But it's a lifelong process, this work. But as soon as I could be conscious of that, so I do this work for them, for those lines. I'm kind of doing it. I heard something saying like I'm the ancestors now of my great great grandchildren. And you're doing stuff now for them, and we might not fully realize or I can be impatient about stuff. I can be impatient to think I want change now, yeah, but it could take decades. I look at the way the world is. It's going to take generations for things to really turn around to be a place of society which is in harmony for the planet and the individuals, given, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, to live in that sense. And we don't have that system at the moment, but it's crumbling and light's being shined on that. So I think about that, like the power of doing stuff, like and leaving behind whatever I do, leave it behind in a better place. If I buy a house and do it up, I want to leave it behind better for the next people. Anything that you touch in life, you want to do that. So I think with my children, what can I impart on them? What can I impart on them in a positive way, rather and being conscious of my crap that doesn't also fall onto them. So it's been like, and doing the workshop to tap in how it works. If people listening, it's like you end up playing roles of this in our workshop. There could be 12 people, and ours was a bit of a like 8, 6, 7, or 8 people an hour one. And you literally are tapping in and being like, they're playing roles in your family constellation, and you're doing it in them, and it's absolutely phenomenal what you're tapping into when you get out of your mind for a bit and just tune into your body, which Neil does an incredible way of actually sort of like creating that container in that space for people to be present in that space. And also it creates this sacred space in terms of whatever happens in there, that's it. This is a container for it. It's you can share openly and honestly without fear of judgment and also fear of that information being, beyond that circle, which can be challenging, can't it? If your own family, if you're going to share stuff with people your nearest and dearest, it's not always easy because they've got all preconceived ideas and judgments and stuff, and you all have got between each other. But when you're playing these roles with these other people, it's absolutely phenomenal what you start to feel in your body and what you start to do. And you're like, this isn't even me. It's like I'm tapping and I'm playing someone's grandmother or father. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm feeling all these emotions. At one point, I was feeling this absolute rage, like it was going to go off in the space. Other times, you just want to reach out and hold the other person. It's like, it was absolutely phenomenal. And anyone who's like interesting about really wanting to sort of dive deeper and clear stuff and put yourself on a more positive trajectory in life, like this is one of the most powerful things I've done. And I've been fortunate to do plenty of workshops in the past, whether it's going on Joe Dispenza workshop and Bruce Lipton workshops and all these, and whatnot. But I definitely put Neil's and this Constellations like the profound effect on me. And I think, like you said, you touched on, you've also got to be. It's not necessarily for the faint-hearted. It's like people who maybe go and do sort of ayahuasca and stuff, and they're not ready for it, like, and then it becomes a crutch for them, and then they want to keep constantly doing it and then that just becomes another addiction for them. They might have let go of the cocaine, but all of a sudden this is like, manifested, and they might think it's for positive, and it can be that journey. But yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. Family constellations of what it can unravel. Um, but it's truly, truly powerful. And I think, like everything, doesn't it? Things show up in your life at the right time for you in that absolute moment when you need it. And it was it for me. It was literally something unfolded in my life. The following day, my wife said, I think you'd really connect with Neil and what he does. Literally the day after. And my mind could have looked at it and thought, I did a little bit. Oh no, I'll look at that some other point. But I put that to one side. I got in touch with him straight away. And it was just the right time for me. My wife actually did family constellations back in 2016 when we were over in Arizona, with a good friend of ours. But it was something that wasn't in my sphere. I was drawn to way other stuff. And then all of a sudden it comes to you at the right time, and truly powerful.
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. And I have a responsibility and I'm an awareness of myself. And what I really want to say in that is like I would never push anyone. I can create a space for people to step into initially, but I would never try and persuade anyone or convince anyone to come and do a workshop. It's like you've got to you've got to be ready, and only you will know whether you're ready or not. And your body will give you a clear indication whether you're ready or not. And so I always trust that these things come up at the right time. Now, there's something I want to touch on. Well, two things. First of all, Rob, massive respect to you because, like, the things that we were talking about before about like why you're doing a lot of these practices and doing the inner work around the kids. Like, one of the things you said there was beautiful, which is like you are the future ancestor of your great grandchildren, and it's to think in that way and to frame how you show up in life in that way is it's pretty beautiful and profound, Rob. So yeah, massive respect to you. Thank you.
I
And
appreciate
like
that.
something else you said there, which is a philosophy that I carry with me, is leaving something better than when you found it, whether that be a friendship, a work contract, a house, a piece of land. Like if you can, leave it better than when you found it. And it's a good philosophy to keep. So thank you. Um, one of the things I want to talk about the constellations and coming into a workshop is around how we use our body, our sensations and our body and our feelings. And there's a common interest between me and you called Bashar, who's a channel. And he talks around like when you follow your passion or you follow your excitement. I translate that a little bit when constellations are following the feeling of something. Again, your feeling will tell you when you're ready for a workshop. But when you're actually in a workshop, a family constellations workshop, and in fact, I think a good idea is just give a little bit more of a depth around how it works. And then I'm going to come into the somatic experience of being a representative. So, for example, okay, like you say, there's anywhere between 6 and 12 people. We're all in a circle. We start the workshop by building the container. So this is for people who are listening. So you said something, Rob. It's a very sacred space and very sacred work takes place within this circle. So people who are familiar with doing inner work, I'm sure people who listen to this will be familiar with some of this and how it works, but we create a very intentional container at the start of the workshop where there's permission, we build trust, and we bring people into the awareness of the body. Now, the reason why we bring an awareness of the body is because when I touched on before about in Western society, we're in a culture of the head, the culture of thinking. Like often people are cut off from their feelings. You know, we look around now, like I get to train to a couple of days. I've got a consultant gig down in South Liverpool in Brunswick, and I get to train and going there and going back. 95% of the people on that train are like been in the screen, completely in the head. But when we come into a workshop at the beginning, we're bringing people back into the body. And often people aren't familiar it's a bit alien to them, like really feeling strong emotion and strong feelings within the body. Now, the reason why that's important, I give this example at the beginning of a workshop, is that when you read about the Kalahari Bushmen, so these are in Africa, and they can spot and feel an animal from kilometers away because they're tapping into this field of information that we talk about called the morphogenetic field of that land where they are, and they can feel into that. But we're cut off on that. We've all as human beings, we've got those faculties to be able to do that, to be able to tune into that, and to be able to feel that. So in a small way, we're a long way from being Kalahari Bushmen, by the way, but in a small way in the workshop, we can build a muscle to that very quickly. So that what happens is then when we choose someone to come and do their own constellation. So for example, say you come and sit down in the chair, we're in a big circle. I'll interview you for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, ask you some questions around your family system. We look at things, okay, is there anyone being excluded? Has there been any abortions, any deaths, any suicides, any black sheep? Has there been any absent fathers, absent mothers? Are you adopted? And start to build up a bit of a picture. And I developed then a hypothesis around what I feel, because I'm also feeling into you as the client about what might be coming up and what we should look at and who you should choose as family members to be represented as part of your constellation. So it might be a case of, okay, I've got a hypothesis around this, Rob. What I'd like you to do is to choose from within the circle someone to represent your mum. She might be still alive, doesn't matter, and represent her father. So then I get you to intuitively choose people from within the circle who are attending the workshop, and then you then intuitively position them within that circle. And then you come and sit back down, and then we start the constellation. And like you said before, because we've done some of these exercises, somatic exercises, of getting people into the feelings of the body, they start to feel like you say, like someone's flicked a switch, start to feel rage and like getting like words in the head off the feeling that they're feeling, like they want to turn the back on the other person, like all these strange things start to happen. And like if you've never experienced that before, it can be a little bit unnerving, but it's there and it's very palpable. And you experienced that before, like with the rage. And then what I then do is, as a facilitator, this is where we talk about phenomenology. As things start to arise in each individual representative who's representing your family system, then we start to unfold the story. And then if need to bring in other people in, and then what that starts to bring into light these intergenerational patterns. And then through these things called healing sentences, we create a movement towards healing within that family system, which then mirrors back to you, and you're able to see that. And then you've been able to recognize that within yourself and really feel it. And so it's quite profound. I mean, it's just something that we could never do it justice to by me and you having this conversation. But it's not just around having an intellectual understanding and a mirror back to you, this pattern. Because we can understand it intellectually, but then when we feel the pattern, when we see it and we feel the emotion, and as a client, like we get this overwhelming like emotion that comes up and clears us out. When you feel it, it's totally different. And once you feel something and understand it intellectually, then the game changes. But what's also important, Rob, is that when you come into a constellation circle in a workshop, it doesn't matter whether you're a client, it doesn't matter whether you're someone who's representing that client's family member, or whether you don't get chosen and just observing, you will always see your own family system mirror back to you. So it's the gift that gives in every way, which is what you said, like 5 years of therapy in one session, because you're getting like, it's almost like a room full of mirrors, constantly mirroring back to you, everything within your family system. And that's why the transformation is so profound. So I'll leave that there and I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, it is. And that's the word that kind of comes up. There's a bit of a theme for it. It's just like profound. It truly is. And you realize that you're obviously, for me, it's like about breaking those chains and like thinking about the now and the future, but you're also playing a role in healing those lines behind you, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know, and that's like that's huge. And yeah, it's just. I'm still, like I say, I'm still, it was about a month ago that I did it, and I'm still integrating it. I'm still reflecting on it. And I think like anything that you do, you've got to, you need to, often my pattern was in the past, I would jump from one, I'd be like, I'm doing this, and then next weekend I'm going to do this. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that idea of burning out, I burnt out in 2016 massively, from wanting to just ride, thinking on a crest of a wave. And then all of a sudden, it's like, no, you can't. That is not how it works. True transformation. You need integration time and reflection time, and that can take weeks, months, even years, depending on how powerful it is, the stuff you do. And this is definitely up there. And everyone will have their own experience of how long it is. But I could tell as well, like going back to the workshop the other day, I could tell me playing the client, which was me being the one who was sort of, it was my turn to to have the constellation. I could tell that other people were affected by my story, that it was reflecting something in their life. Truly, truly profound, and again about no accidents. Everyone came there on that day at the same time. There was that amount of people for a reason. And something amazing about the workshop is it's a bit like what I love about doing these kind of things is the connection that you have with people. Like you haven't met any of them before, and by the end of the day, you spend that one day with them. But it feels like it's a remembrance of times in times that you've been together before and other levels and other times, you know, and they even may have been someone in your family for you, in that lifetime. I've spoken on this podcast quite openly about some of my beliefs about the idea that I think that, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And um that when we do end this world, leaders, it's just a doorway back to, our soul exists forever. I truly believe that. Doesn't take my fear away from dying as such, fully, but it certainly heals a lot of those traumas. I don't want to go off on that one now anyway. But and you touched on before about was having a bit of a someone that we're kind of interested in Bashar, and like the power of some of his teachings and other people's teachings. You touched on before, was it Bert Hellinger, who and then you've got your own facilitator from Ireland and stuff that you're working with. Um, and I think often we touched on about, when we grow up, like 0 to 7, you talk about things like how crystallized they become, our belief around money, our belief around love, our belief around the world, they can get really sort of like crystallized in that time, and then we got to unfold them. And that's why I think it's important as we go on our journey is to have certain people in our lives that it might not be a close family member, it might not be a friend, to have other, and that's what's been about amazing about the internet is you can have someone like a Bashar or someone else, other people, and they become such a great source of inspiration for you to help you to sort of burn through a lot of those negative beliefs that we've been holding by. Or they can be a bit of a mirror as well. But again, as it is with the work that you're doing. One thing I'm interested to talk about, maybe because being a father and stuff, is can you expand on either the father wound and the daughter concept within family constellations?
The father wounds and the daughter concept. Yeah, so the father wounds is an interesting one because it's I mean you can read a lot about it on the internet, and I haven't got those kids, but I've certainly got that father wounds, which is the effects of having like an absent father and how we show up, in the world within our masculinity, and within society as we know it, there's a real challenge around the wounded masculine or the wounded man through broken fathers or absent fathers. And there's a couple of people like Paul Garrigan who have done a podcast with before who know well. He's doing that work, and bringing men together. It's really important. And so the 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 father wounds in relation to the daughter. So my understanding, Rob, is that with daughters or the daughter's in the realm of the mother for those first 7 to 8 years. So that's the nurturing, the feminine, the taking care, and the very emotional, like very, 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 very maternal. And then what happens is that the daughter then starts to move into the realm of the father. Because then through the father, it's the container. I mean, the father's always present, needs to be present throughout the child's first 7 or 8 years, but more in the realm of the mother. Then when she starts to become 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, she's then starting to come into the realm of the father, where she then looks to the father and the relationship with the father, of how then she can then orientate herself, because then she's going to start to look for a relationship. She goes through puberty. She's starting to like, what's safe? What's a role model look like in terms of what does healthy masculinity look like? So again, it's safety and security for a daughter looking for a father. And so as a responsibility as a father, all throughout, but more importantly, having your shit together, when your daughter's coming into the teenage years, to have a very solid, strong, safe container with boundaries for her to be able to feel safe and to orientate herself, within a container. So an example would be when you come to a family constellations workshop, that container that work takes place in creates the safety. And when the safety, it allows you to rest, your nervous system becomes more restful, and with the more safety allows you to open up a lot more. So you can imagine someone like a child daughter who grows up in an environment where that's the case, then that daughter is more balanced, more settled, more secure, more safe, healthy character, healthy traits, healthy behaviors, strong role model from a man. So that when then she starts to get into relationships when she's older, in a general sense, you're giving her the best possible foundation to then build up from. Whereas then if you've got a daughter who's got an absent father or an abusive father, um, someone who's there but emotionally unavailable, what you'll find is then, Rob, when they become adults, the daughter's view of the world, because like I say, how we see the world shapes the world, and how we see the world is shaped by our childhood. The only relationships or the potential relationships that we can see is all that we know, is because we know relationships, or we had a relationship with an emotionally unavailable man or father because he was absent. So then we look for them, not me, but obviously daughters look for that then in adult life, which then creates these patterns of nervous system dysregulation, potential abuse, unhealthy behaviors, unhealthy bonding. So it's important for you, maybe as a father, using you as an example, is that why it's important to do the work to create that safe, strong, healthy container for your daughter as she's coming into, well, you got two daughters now. You got a daughter and a son.
Two daughters.
So you got to get to practice twice. So when
Yeah.
they become teenagers, you've got that strong, solid container of safety,
Yeah.
where they've got the clear boundaries that, okay, we don't go beyond these, we operate within these. I know where I am. It's like a metaphor I like to use is that, imagine that you are in a swimming pool. You're standing in the middle of the swimming pool, and okay, I can see the sides, so I feel safe. Imagine you fall overboard in the middle of the ocean. Like, you can't see which way. It's like you're in a very dangerous situation because you can't orientate yourself to your environment. And so you're making decisions based on fear rather than from security, which can have consequences. So happy
Yeah.
to go a little bit deeper on that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And it just goes to show how deep this work is, and actually just deep the work that we all have to do to unravel a lot of things. Because often, you see it's very easy to see someone else, isn't it? And to highlight what they're doing wrong. Like whether it's much easier to look at someone else and go, this is what's wrong with your life, rather than looking at our own stuff.
Mm.
But I guess what I mean is you start to realize when you see other people's stuff and my own stuff, you think, where's this come from? You start to realize like what has happened at what point, and it's not as easy as just saying, oh, you just need to do this, need to do that. Like it's so complex, it's so deep, and that's why I think it comes to the point. I remember Bashar actually says this, and he says, you can't change anyone else. All you can ever do is you can't change anyone else's mind or change anyone else. All you can ever do is change yourself. And by changing yourself, you can be an inspiration for others as a reflection to inspire them to make changes as well.
You don't realize how profound that statement is that you just made, because we are cultured and nurtured to think about the separate person out there Well, the only thing that we can ever change is ourselves. And by changing ourselves, thank you for saying this because I was going to touch on this. When we change ourselves, the people in our life can't relate to us in the same way. So what it does is, Rob, it creates a ripple effect. So as you continue to do the work on yourself, other people transform around you, people fall away, new people come in, but you evolve. But then as you're doing the work, you're doing the work for your ancestors, you're doing the work for your kids, you're doing work for your partner, and you're creating positive ripples out into the world where people can't help but transform. So by you doing the work on you, that transforms the people around you. Then that can then ripples out into your community. And then from the community, it ripples out into society. So family constellations for me is a form of activism. So I don't just do family constellations, but it's a big part of my work. But by being able to do that work on me and family constellations being a mirror back to me and showing me my blind spots and these traits and these behaviors, I can transform. And so the ripple effects that for me is how society changes. And like Buddhists talk around like presence and like doing the meditation. But because what it's doing is it's bringing an awareness to you for you to then transform and change. And that's why it's a form of activism. Now there's a way of approaching life, Rob, which is why I said before I'm almost becoming convinced it's a deeper spiritual practice, is that when you go about your day, and I'm sure you know this already, but for people who are listening, I challenge people just start with one day. And when you go about your day, notice how you relate to other people, whether it's the kids, your wife, other family members, people at work, the people you meet on the bus, on the train. Notice if someone cuts you off, how you respond. Because what reality is doing, what we think is out there, is constantly mirroring back to us. Us. So we can transform ourselves, not just in a workshop, but just by noticing how we respond to people. So if, like, say, like your wife does something and she pisses you off, but it's not that she pisses you off, you feel pissed off because of something that she's done. Let me change the language because you're choosing to respond in that moment. That will give you an indication of something that's within you that might have its root in a relationship with your mum. And just taking almost like an inventory, almost like playing bingo, really, but taking an inventory of all these responses over the course of a day and notice where you've responded in an angry way, or whether you've responded in a healthy way, whether you've responded in a nurturing way, and just notice and just record it over the course of the day, because that will give you an indication about what you need to work on. And like, you don't have to pay nothing. That's there each and every moment of every week. It's simple, but it's not easy because we've got these things called emotions. But I challenge anyone who's listening to this to try that, because then you're doing the work. Everything is constantly reflecting back at us, but we do the work on us. We can only change our response to that. And in the response is the transformation. And in the transformation is the change in the ripple effect. So thank you for bringing that up, Rob, because it's a very profound statement you've made.
Yeah, and it reminds me, the Gandhi quote, isn't it? Be the change you want to see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing, not liking the way things are. And it's tricky because obviously some things are big things, big societal systems in place, and you think, what can I do? And it can feel disempowering sometimes to see certain stuff. But then when you come into your power and find our power and realize the impact that we can have, true impact we can have on ourselves and those around us, then yeah, and I appreciate you saying that about having that reflection in the day. Something that I am really it ties in. One thing I was aware of it somewhat, but it's really come online for me since I did the constellations, and that was Richard Rudd's work with the 68 the gene keys. And I'm really kind of studying that now, and it ties in perfectly. Actually, it's a really good connection with family constellation works because an element of eating into your gene key, it shows you your wound, but it also shows you your gift you know, within that as well. So we can all tap into that. And that's the thing is about being aware of your patterns and stuff. But it's definitely, it's a lifelong journey, but it's a beautiful one. And I have some times where I'm so humbled and so grateful for, for this life, like, and what I've got and this, like, this, if you think about how much stuff's changing now, like how intense, I don't know if we said it on the podcast, but I said I did hear someone speak about this year in terms of like astrologically, something like this 2024 was going to feel like 10 years worth of transformation for the planet and the individuals that are on it. And for me personally, I've had those 10 years. I may even look 10 years older. It's been, it's been that intense at times. How, but it's in the intensity, isn't it? Like that's where the true growth comes from. And like sometimes you do think, God, is it gonna, I'm gonna have a bit of a, is it gonna smooth out for a little bit? Can I have, can I have just a few weeks of it feeling calm? No, 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 not now. Maybe, we'll see. Um, and one thing that I really like, and this is what I think it is, something, and I think I remember seeing it on your work. It's like be the change, but break the chain. And like to break the chain is hard work.
It's graft. Yeah, it's again, there's two things there. I always say two things, but the something you mentioned before is that like you don't get to choose like how long it takes. It's like you don't come to a workshop, for example, and it's like, okay, now I've took a pill and I'm healed. When you do the true work, you could be in a process, an internal process of challenge and sadness and then rage, and then you'll have like a little window where it's like, oh, I feel okay, and then you get pulled back into it, you get triggered by something else. That could be months. That could go for. But like you said, it's a lifetime's work because we are nature. Like nature's got its own cycles, and we don't get to choose or take a pill and think, okay, I'm all right now. When you truly do the work, you go deep into yourself and understanding yourself. It's one of the hardest things that you'll ever do. And that's why a lot of people don't change, Rob, or choose not to change because the pain and the suffering of staying the same is far less than the pain and the suffering to actually go through the change in the short to medium term, but to actually come out the other side completely transformed. That's why a lot of people don't go into the work. I don't just mean family constellation, but doing the true work because it's bloody hard.
And on that as well, like if you think about it, how it's in many ways society set up, in some ways, it's actually just like it doesn't encourage like hard work, or it's like, this the nanny state, it's like we'll look after you, you don't have to push yourself, and but you live such like a bare minimum life, and it's like, what do you want to do? Just sit at home and watch binge Netflix series, or do you want to do the inner work, at night in your own time and to do that study and to face your stuff? And don't be wrong, I love a good Netflix series or whatever from time to time. And I'm not here to say like I'm the enlightened one because I fall into those things as well. But the growth comes for me from doing something hard, whether it was me training for a marathon or other things. Like you don't really want to get up on a Sunday morning at crack of dawn and go for that 2 hour run to get you like. And there's loads of things like there's someone, I think it's called the comfort trap, or so, there's a book I would call the comfort trap, and so many are just used to things being comfortable. But and you used that phrase, wasn't it? Like, it's not, life can be, it's tougher to stay still. It's harder staying still and not working for your stuff, like thinking like you're not going to do the work. But when you do this and you go on this path, like you have so many, and it's the connections that you're making, it's the new people you're making, the connect everything. Life just becomes more rich. And you know what? You could become strong. You have that inner strength that you're not swayed by stuff as much. You're not pulled by the collective. Like, you find that you build that self-esteem, that strength, that core strength in you to be like, whatever happens, it reminds me of being like, like you're a strong tree, you've got your roots and they're deep. Where in the past you might be something that you just get blow over easy, or you just get swept along with the crowd. And and I think when I think about it, I think about we want to say the powers that be of society. They know that how powerful we all are. And if only we remember that and tune into that, it's over. Like it's literally over. So that's the work that we're doing. And then we can only do it individually on our own path.
Again, Rob, amazing words what you're saying because I'm always like feeling into what I can go into in terms of like different themes. But what you just touched on there is that's one of the benefits of doing constellations. It's like you're becoming a strong tree. Your roots run deep. You've got healthy branches and leaves, and you become a stronger person because of it. Like you become resilient, accepting. Like one of the most amazing benefits of family constellations is becoming self-aware. Because when you really come online and develop your self-awareness, you start to see clearly. And like what you're talking about there about these social systems and like sort of the governing bodies, for example, without going into anything too radical, is that they're relying on us to be at a certain level of awareness. But then when you start to develop more self-awareness, that's why I've seen about it being activism. Some people are going write on a placard and go to Down Street and glue themselves to roads or chain themselves, and that's a form of activism. This is an inner form of activism, and family constellations is a way of that because it's bringing you completely online and self-aware. Like it's like you've been living in a dream. So there's so many different benefits, like, and that is one of them. And it's like it doesn't get talked about enough in family constellations. Really, is that's one of the benefits. That's self-awareness. Like it's profound. It's like 'cause all of a sudden the blinkers are off. It's like, whoa, you think you're coming to work on your family system, and all of a sudden, bang, like you're seeing life in a completely different way, and you're seeing it more from a place of truth. And when you see life from a place of truth, you've got a responsibility to change.
Yeah.
I'll say no more than that.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I think we could probably one of that. I think we're gonna have a round two and a round three at
I
some point
like that.
for
Yeah,
sure. A phrase that keeps coming up for me over the time is like about getting back to our roots. I've used it as a phrase numerous
love
times in
it.
this podcast about getting back to roots, like remembering who we are and our true potential. That's why I love like Bruce Lipton's work and Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden about becoming like almost like supernatural. And like once you tap into this stuff, you're like, wow, like the power that we've truly got and the impact that we can have on ourselves and the world is truly incredible. And I think that's something that having these things that you're running, like, it must be, I think about, it's for you, it's like what a gift it is for you to go on this journey yourself, but then for you also to have that ripple effect and be a facilitator for this work with other people. And then the ripple effect that every individual that you work with then goes out and creates that change like you talk about. It's the ultimate activism, really, isn't it? It's like, you're really going to make that true change, that inner change that's going to unfold over however long lifetimes upon lifetimes of change by doing this work now. And that's why I think right now is so important to be alive at this moment and to be going through such transformational change that's happening internal, but in the world. It's like, you know, it's it's a gift. And I really I honor you what work you're doing. And I'm really glad that my wife sent me your details so I could connect with you.
Now, well, Robert, massive respect to you for stepping into. I mean, you do lots of different things, but like stepping into this particular work and doing it for yourself and for your family and for your kids and for breaking the chain. I've got massive respect to you. It's not for the faint-hearted, and I honor your courage and the inner work that you're doing. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Before we sign off, then I was just like, if people are like listening to this thinking, what, how can I find out more about this? Like, what, maybe tell us a little bit about what things you've got coming up, and how people can connect with you, and then where they can find you to do that.
Yeah, so the best place to get me is Instagram. So it'll be neilmeekin.com _ pool of life. And so I'll send you some of these links. I'm on Facebook, but not as active as Instagram. Um, I've got a workshop, a 1 day workshop coming up on Saturday, the 9th of November in the Baltic Quarter in Liverpool. So there's just a couple of spaces left for that. I'm starting to do some online stuff now, Rob, because I'm going to be traveling quite a bit next year. So I want to be bringing the work more online. So there'll be some details on that on the Instagram page. And so I can do that. And yeah, I'll send you some links for what's coming up. And then you can subscribe to my newsletter, which will have all the different workshops I'm running. I'm running probably 2 workshops a month now. So one day and then one online.
That's great for the online aspect because it's obviously you're in Liverpool at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
So people at close proximity for the day ones. But I'll even say like it was very powerful for me doing it online when I did the one-to-one with you. So if someone might be listening to this in Scotland or, America, like it doesn't matter, it's still very potent and powerful, where you can connect. Incredible in ways. So but I really appreciate your time today, Neil. Like it's been a privilege chatting to you. I love this. I always just this is why I love doing this podcast. I just love having like interesting conversations, thought-provoking, empowering conversations, which can like have a huge impact on it always have a huge impact on me, and I just feel blessed that I can then share this to people and put it on there, and then it can impact other people again, like what you do. It's just that ripple effect. And it ties into that idea of like, it's about being the change, but also just doing things that can leave things behind better than what, how it were. So, any closing things you want to say, Neil, before we sign off?
Create more ripples. But thank you, Rob. Thanks for the great questions and being able to talk on a particular level with you. And allow me to express some of my ideas. I mean, like you say, there could be an episode 2 and an episode 3. There's so many other things we can talk about. But yeah, thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. And yeah, keep up the great work. And yeah, I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Neil. Cheers.